Ladies and gentlemen, one day, the person who was so comfortable losing you may finally understand what they lost. One day, they may look back. They may remember your voice. They may remember the way you cared. They may remember the little things you did that they once considered ordinary. They may remember the conversations they ignored, the patience they took for granted, the chances they were given, and the love they assumed would always be waiting for them. And one day they may regret it. But listen carefully, because this is where most people make their greatest mistake. Their regret does not mean you should take them back. Their tears do not automatically mean they have changed. Their apology does not erase the damage. Their loneliness does not become your responsibility. And their realization does not create an obligation for you to reopen a door that you worked so hard to close. Sometimes people understand your value only after they lose access to you. But your job is not to wait around hoping for that realization. Your job is to become so deeply connected to yourself that whether they regret losing you or not, no longer determines your peace. Because the greatest victory is not watching someone who hurt you suffer. The greatest victory is reaching the point where their suffering is no longer necessary for your healing. That is when you become free. There is a strange thing about human nature. We often recognize value through absence. When something is constantly available, the mind can become accustomed to it. The sunrise happens every morning and we stop noticing its beauty. The air is always around us, and we rarely think about it. A person who constantly gives us attention can become part of our psychological background. Their messages become expected. Their kindness becomes expected. Their patience becomes expected. Their forgiveness becomes expected. And what is expected is often taken for granted until it disappears. Then the mind notices. Then memory becomes active. Then the empty space begins speaking. Suddenly the silence feels louder than the conversations ever did. The empty chair becomes meaningful. The unanswered phone becomes meaningful. The absence of the person who was always there becomes meaningful, and the mind begins asking questions. Where are they? Why did they stop? Why aren't they reaching out anymore? Did they finally move on? Did I lose them? Was I wrong? And perhaps the most painful question of all, did I realize their value too late? This is where regret can begin. But ladies and gentlemen, understand something very important. Regret is an emotion. Transformation is a process. Someone can regret losing you without becoming capable of loving you properly. Someone can miss you without understanding you. Someone can want you back without being prepared to treat you differently. Someone can feel lonely without actually being ready for a healthy relationship. That distinction can save you years of pain, because one of the greatest traps after heartbreak is believing that someone's return is proof of their transformation. It is not. Sometimes people return because they miss the comfort. They miss the attention. They miss the familiarity. They miss having someone available. They miss the emotional security you provided. They miss knowing that someone cared. But missing what you gave them is not necessarily the same as appreciating who you are. And this is why you must become wiser than your emotions. If someone comes back, do not simply listen to what they say. Watch what they do. Do not ask only, do you miss me? Ask, what have you learned? Do not ask only, do you still love me? Ask, how will you love me differently? Do not ask, do you regret leaving? Ask, what changed inside you? Those questions separate nostalgia from growth. And you need to understand this because sometimes the heart remembers the beautiful moments and conveniently forgets the painful ones. Distance can make the past look more beautiful than it actually was. You remember their smile. You remember the good morning messages. You remember the nights you laughed together. You remember the moments when they held your hand. You remember the promises. You remember the dreams. And suddenly you begin thinking, maybe it wasn't that bad. But remember the entire story. Remember why you cried. Remember why you felt ignored. Remember why you questioned your worth. Remember how many times you explained the same boundary. Remember how many times you forgave the same behavior. Remember how many times you hoped tomorrow would be different. Memory can become selective when the heart is lonely. That is why healing requires honesty, not hatred, not revenge. Honesty. You must be willing to say, there were beautiful moments, but there was also pain. I loved them, but I was not treated the way I deserved. I miss them, but I do not miss who I became around them. I forgive them, but I will not return to the same pattern. This is maturity, because healing does not require you to pretend the person was completely evil. Maybe they had good qualities. Maybe they genuinely cared about you in certain moments. Maybe they were wounded. Maybe they were afraid. Maybe they were emotionally immature. Maybe they did not know how to communicate. Maybe they were fighting battles you could not see. You can understand all of that without accepting mistreatment. Compassion does not require self-abandonment. Understanding someone's pain does not mean you must volunteer to be hurt by it. You can say, I understand why you behaved that way, and still say, I will not accept it again. That is strength. That is emotional maturity. That is what it means to have compassion without surrendering your boundaries. Ladies and gentlemen, there is another truth you must understand. Sometimes the person who hurt you was not the person you thought they were, and sometimes what you are grieving is not the person. You are grieving the version of them that existed in your imagination. You are grieving who you hoped they would become. You are grieving the future you imagined. You are grieving the relationship you thought you were building. And that can be more painful than losing the actual relationship. Because you are not only saying goodbye to what happened, you are saying goodbye to what you thought could happen. And sometimes you must release the fantasy before you can accept reality. This is one of the hardest psychological experiences. We project our hopes onto people. We see potential. We see possibility. We think they could become more loving. They could become more consistent. They could become more mature. They could finally understand me. And because we love the possibility, we tolerate the reality. But reality must eventually become stronger than fantasy. You cannot build a life with someone's potential. You build a life with their actual behavior. And if their behavior repeatedly contradicts their promises, believe the pattern. Patterns reveal more than promises. Words can be beautiful. Actions reveal truth. Anyone can say, I will change. But change is demonstrated over time. Anyone can say, I am sorry. But accountability is demonstrated through behavior. Anyone can say, I don't want to lose you. But commitment is demonstrated through consistency. So if they return, do not be hypnotized by emotion. Observe. Slow down. Listen. Watch. Give reality time to reveal itself. You do not need to make a decision in the first emotional conversation. You do not need to immediately forgive everything. You do not need to immediately reopen your heart. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to think. You are allowed to say, I need time. That is not cruelty. That is wisdom. Because your heart is not a public place, where everyone gets unlimited access. Your trust is earned, your peace is protected, your love is valuable, and you should not hand it back simply because someone finally realized they made a mistake. Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps someone listening right now is waiting for a person to regret losing them. Maybe that is what keeps you awake at night. You imagine them eventually realizing what they did. You imagine them looking at your pictures. You imagine them wondering about you. You imagine them trying to come back. And perhaps a part of you wants them to suffer. Not because you are cruel, but because you want confirmation. You want proof that you mattered. You want evidence that the relationship meant something. You want them to say, "I was wrong. I should have appreciated you. I should never have treated you that way. I lost someone special. And I understand why the heart wants that. But you must be careful. Because if your healing depends on their regret, then they still control your healing. Think about that. If you need them to suffer before you can feel valuable, then their behavior still determines your emotional state. If you need them to return before you can feel worthy, then you are still waiting for external validation. If you need their apology before you can move forward, then you have handed them the key to your future. Take that key back. Your worth does not require their confession. Your life does not require their regret. Your future does not require their return. You mattered whether they recognized it or not. You were valuable whether they appreciated you or not. You were worthy whether they stayed or left. That is the truth. And once you understand it, something powerful happens. You stop trying to prove your worth. You stop trying to make them jealous. You stop posting things just so they will see them. You stop checking who viewed your story. You stop wondering who they are talking to. You stop analyzing every song they post. You stop asking mutual friends about them. You stop searching for hidden messages. And slowly your mind becomes quiet. That quiet is healing. Silence is not always punishment. Sometimes silence is simply the space where your identity returns. Because when you are constantly emotionally connected to someone, you may lose touch with your own inner world. You become concerned with their moods, their choices, their reactions, their approval, their attention, their absence. And eventually you forget to ask, what do I want? What do I need? What kind of life do I want? What kind of person do I want to become? What kind of relationship actually deserves me? That is why walking away can become a psychological awakening. You begin to hear yourself again. You begin to recognize your own thoughts. You begin to discover your own dreams. You begin to remember who you were before the relationship, and perhaps you become someone you never knew you could be. Someone stronger, someone calmer, someone more selective, someone who does not confuse attention with love, someone who does not confuse chemistry with compatibility, someone who does not confuse suffering with loyalty, someone who understands that love should not require the destruction of self-respect. This is the transformation that matters, not whether they regret losing you, but whether you stop regretting choosing yourself. Because sometimes you will feel guilty. You will wonder, was I too harsh? Should I have given another chance? Maybe I should have stayed. Maybe I expected too much. No. Ask yourself instead, was I asking for basic respect? Was I asking for honesty? Was I asking for consistency? Was I asking to be treated with dignity? If you were asking for basic emotional safety, you were not asking for too much. You were asking the wrong person. And there is a difference. Sometimes the lesson is not lower your expectations. Sometimes the lesson is raise your standards. Stop trying to convince people to become capable of giving what they have repeatedly shown they cannot give. You cannot love someone into emotional maturity. You cannot sacrifice yourself into being appreciated. You cannot give more and more until someone finally develops the ability to value you. At some point you must step back. And stepping back does not mean you stopped loving. It means you stopped abandoning yourself to prove your love. That is an important distinction. Ladies and gentlemen, there is dignity in walking away. Not because you want the other person to chase you, not because you want to make them regret everything, but because you have finally accepted that your peace has a price, and you are no longer willing to pay for someone else's inconsistency with your mental and emotional well-being. Walking away is difficult. Anyone can leave when they stop caring. The difficult thing is leaving when you still care, when you still love them, when you still miss them, when part of you still hopes they will change. That is when walking away requires courage. You are saying, I care about you, but I cannot continue this. I love you, but I must love myself too. I forgive you, but I cannot keep living inside this pattern. I wish you well, but I must move forward. That is not weakness. That is emotional courage. And sometimes the person you leave will finally realize your value. They may experience a kind of emotional shock because they assumed your presence was permanent. They thought you would always answer. They thought you would always forgive. They thought you would eventually come back. But suddenly, you do not. And the mind struggles with the disappearance of certainty. They may begin remembering things they once ignored. The coffee you made, the message you sent, the way you remembered their favorite things, the way you listened when nobody else did, the way you celebrated their small victories, the way you stayed during difficult moments. They may remember all of it, but let them remember. You do not need to interrupt their realization. You do not need to remind them. You do not need to send a message saying, "Do you miss me yet?" Let silence reveal what words could not, and if they truly regret losing you, they will have to confront that feeling themselves. That is their journey. Not yours. Your journey is healing. Their journey is accountability. Do not confuse the two. You are not responsible for teaching someone every lesson they refused to learn while they had you. Life will teach them. Consequences will teach them. Your absence may teach them. But you do not need to become their teacher. You are allowed to walk away and let life do the rest. Sometimes consequences are more powerful than explanations. When you repeatedly explain your pain, someone can become accustomed to hearing it. But when you stop participating in the cycle, the reality becomes impossible to ignore. The relationship changes because you changed your participation in it, and this is why boundaries matter. A boundary is not, "You must change." A boundary is, "If this continues, I will leave." That is powerful because it is about your behavior, not their control. You cannot control another person's actions. You can control your response. You cannot control whether they respect you. You can control whether you remain in a place where you're consistently disrespected. You cannot control whether they choose you. You can control whether you continue choosing someone who does not choose you. This is where your power lives, not in controlling another person, in controlling your own direction. Ladies and gentlemen, never confuse control with power. Control is trying to make someone behave differently. Power is being able to walk away when they refuse. Control says, "How can I make them love me?" Power says, "I will not beg for love." Control says, "How can I make them regret leaving?" Power says, I will build a life that does not depend on their regret. Control says, how can I make them jealous? Power says, I don't need to prove anything. That is the difference. And when you truly reach this point, something interesting may happen. The person may come back. They may send a message. They may call. They may say they miss you. They may ask how you are. They may say they have been thinking about you. They may say, I made a mistake. And your old self may have jumped immediately. But your new self will pause. Because healing has taught you something. You have learned that words can awaken memories. But actions determine whether those memories deserve another chapter. So you listen. You don't panic. You don't celebrate too quickly. You don't immediately hand over your heart. You observe. What exactly are they taking responsibility for? Do they blame you? Do they make excuses? Do they minimize what happened? Do they say, I hurt you because you made me? Or do they say, I hurt you, and that was my responsibility? There is a world of difference between those two statements. Accountability does not say, I am sorry you felt hurt. Accountability says, I understand what I did, why it hurt you, and I take responsibility. That is maturity, and if they cannot demonstrate that, then their return may simply be another cycle beginning. Do not mistake movement for progress. Someone can move back into your life without becoming a better person. Someone can return without changing. Someone can apologize without transforming. Someone can promise without delivering. So watch. Give time the opportunity to reveal character. Time is one of the greatest truth detectors. People can perform for a day. They can perform for a week. But patterns eventually reveal themselves. That is why you should never make permanent decisions based on temporary emotional intensity. Let the emotions settle. Let reality speak. Let time reveal. And protect your peace while you observe. Ladies and gentlemen, there is also a painful possibility we must discuss. What if they never come back? What if they never regret it? What if they move on? What if they never understand your value? Would you still be okay? You must learn to say yes, because your healing cannot be conditional. You cannot say, I will move forward if they regret losing me. No. Move forward regardless. Maybe one day they will understand. Maybe they will not. Maybe they will contact you. Maybe they will not. Maybe they will apologize. Maybe they will remain silent. But your life continues. Your heart continues. Your dreams continue. Your future continues. And perhaps the most beautiful thing you will eventually discover is that you no longer care whether they understand. That is freedom. At first, you want them to understand because you want justice. Then you want them to understand because you want validation. Then eventually, you stop needing them to understand at all. You understand. And that becomes enough. You understand what happened. You understand what you learned. You understand what you deserve. You understand what you will never tolerate again. You understand what kind of love you want. And you understand that sometimes losing someone is not the greatest loss. Sometimes losing yourself is. And you will never sacrifice yourself for another person again. This is what heartbreak can teach you, if you allow it. Pain can make you bitter, or pain can make you conscious. The choice is yours. You can spend years saying, people cannot be trusted. Or you can say, I now know how to trust myself. You can say, I will never love again. Or, I will love again, but I will not abandon myself again. You can say, I will never forgive. Or, I can forgive without forgetting the lesson. That is transformation. And transformation does not mean you become cold. It means you become discerning. You still love, but you choose carefully. You still trust, but you trust gradually. You still forgive, but you maintain boundaries. You still give, but you no longer give until you are empty. You still believe in love, but you no longer believe that suffering is proof of love. That is maturity. Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps the person who hurt you will eventually regret losing you. Let them. Perhaps they will look back and realize that they had someone rare. Let them realize. Perhaps they will compare every future relationship to what they had with you. Let them. Perhaps they will wonder why they threw away something valuable. Let them wonder. But do not build your life around their regret. Build your life around your growth, because there is something much more satisfying than watching someone regret losing you. It is becoming someone you are proud of becoming. It is waking up without anxiety. It is sleeping peacefully. It is trusting yourself. It is walking into a room without wondering who approves of you. It is looking into the mirror and knowing you did not abandon yourself. It is becoming successful without needing someone from your past to notice. It is becoming happy without needing someone from your past to feel bad. That is real victory. Not revenge, not jealousy, not punishment. Growth. Your life becomes the answer. You don't have to explain. You don't have to prove. You don't have to announce. You simply become. And when you become, the old version of you disappears. The person who once begged for attention becomes the person who values peace. The person who once chased becomes the person who chooses. The person who once waited becomes the person who creates. The person who once feared being alone becomes comfortable in their own company. And once you become comfortable alone, you become much harder to manipulate because fear of abandonment no longer controls you. You can leave, you can say no, you can walk away, you can close the door. And you can do it without hatred. That is power. Ladies and gentlemen, remember this. You do not need to hate someone to stop choosing them. Sometimes the healthiest ending is peaceful. You can say, I hope you heal. I hope you grow. I hope you find peace. But I am not coming back. That is enough. You do not need to destroy them. You do not need to expose them. You do not need to make them jealous. You do not need to become cruel. You simply need to become unavailable to what destroys your peace. And if they come back, remember, a return is an invitation to evaluate, not an instruction to accept. You decide. You are allowed to say yes. You are allowed to say no. And neither decision makes you weak. What matters is that the decision comes from consciousness rather than desperation. If you take them back, because you are afraid of being alone, you may repeat the pattern. If you take them back because you genuinely observe transformation, that is different. But never take someone back simply because you miss them. Missing someone is not evidence that they belong in your future. Sometimes you miss people who were never good for you. Sometimes you miss places you should never return to. Sometimes you miss versions of your life that no longer fit who you have become. Nostalgia is not a compass. Wisdom is. Let wisdom guide you. And if you choose not to take them back, do not feel guilty. You are not obligated to give someone another opportunity to hurt you simply because they apologized. Forgiveness does not require access. You can forgive someone and never speak to them again. You can release anger without reopening the relationship. You can wish someone well from a distance. You can close the chapter without burning the book. That is peace. And perhaps one day you will realize that the person you were so afraid to lose was not actually the person you needed to keep. Perhaps you needed to lose them to find yourself. Perhaps you needed the silence to hear your own thoughts. Perhaps you needed the rejection to develop your standards. Perhaps you needed the heartbreak to discover your strength. Perhaps you needed the ending to begin again. Life has a strange way of removing what we believe we cannot live without, and showing us that we are capable of building something new. And when that happens, do not look backward with bitterness. Look backward with gratitude for the lesson. Not gratitude for the pain itself, but gratitude for what you became through it, because you are stronger now. You see more clearly. You recognize patterns faster. You understand your boundaries. You understand your needs. You know what you will not tolerate. And most importantly, you know that you can survive losing someone. That knowledge changes everything. Because once you know you can survive the loss, you stop accepting anything simply to prevent it. You stop compromising your dignity. You stop begging someone to stay. You stop shrinking yourself. You stop becoming less of yourself just to make another person comfortable. You become whole. And wholeness is attractive because it is authentic. You are no longer asking, what must I become so they won't leave? You are asking, who am I when I'm not trying to be chosen? That question can transform your entire life. Ladies and gentlemen, there will always be people who do not recognize your value. There will always be people who misunderstand you. There will always be people who leave. There will always be people who take your kindness for granted. That is part of being human. But do not let someone else's inability to recognize you become evidence against yourself. You do not need everyone to understand you. You need to understand yourself. You need to know what you stand for. You need to know your values. You need to know your boundaries. You need to know what kind of love you are willing to accept. And when you know those things, rejection becomes information rather than identity. Someone leaving does not mean, I am not enough. It may simply mean, we were not aligned. Someone rejecting you does not mean, I am unlovable. It means, they were not the person capable of loving me in the way I needed. That distinction protects your self-worth. Never turn someone else's decision into a definition of yourself. You are more than someone's relationship status with you. You are more than someone's opinion. You are more than someone's inability to commit. You are more than someone's betrayal. You are more than someone's rejection. You are a human being with an entire future ahead of you. Do not give one chapter the power to define the whole book. And if they come back, let them meet the new you. The you who no longer accepts empty words. The you who no longer confuses attention with love. The you who no longer begs for consistency. The you who no longer fears saying no. The you who has learned that peace is not boring. The you who knows that healthy love feels different. It does not require constant anxiety. It does not require guessing. It does not require chasing. It does not require proving. It does not require losing yourself. Healthy love allows you to breathe. Healthy love allows you to be yourself. Healthy love does not punish vulnerability. Healthy love does not use silence as a weapon. Healthy love does not make you constantly question your worth. Healthy love is not perfect, but it is accountable. It is respectful. It is consistent. And if someone wants to return, they must understand that they are not returning to the old version of you. The old version may have accepted what the new version will not. The old version may have forgiven without boundaries. The new version knows forgiveness, and boundaries can coexist. The old version may have waited. The new version moves forward. The old version may have been afraid of losing them. The new version is more afraid of losing herself. That is growth. That is what you should protect. Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps this is the message you needed today. Stop waiting for them to regret losing you. Let them regret it if they must. But you have work to do. You have a life to build. You have dreams to pursue. You have wounds to heal. You have parts of yourself to rediscover. You have a future that deserves your attention. Do not spend your future monitoring someone's past behavior. Do not keep checking whether they have finally realized what they lost. Your life is happening now. The morning is happening now. Your opportunities are happening now. Your growth is happening now. Your healing is happening now. And every minute you spend obsessing over whether they regret losing you is a minute you are not investing in becoming the person you are meant to become. Take your attention back. Take your energy back. Take your heart back. Take your identity back. And move forward. If they regret losing you, that is their lesson. If they return, that is your decision. If they never return, that is still your life. Either way, you win when you choose yourself. Because the final destination is not revenge. It is peace. The final destination is not making them jealous. It is becoming secure. The final destination is not proving you were valuable. It is knowing your value without proof. The final destination is not getting them back. It is getting yourself back. That is the greatest victory. So let them wonder, let them remember, let them reflect, let them face the consequences of their choices. But you keep walking, you keep growing, you keep becoming, you keep building. And one day you may look back and realize that the person you thought you needed was actually the experience that taught you how to need yourself less and trust yourself more. You will realize that the heartbreak did not destroy you. It introduced you to a stronger version of yourself. The version who knows that love is a choice, not a prison. The version who knows that forgiveness is not surrender. The version who knows that loneliness is better than constant emotional chaos. The version who knows that being wanted is not enough. You want to be respected. You want to be understood. You want to be valued. You want to be chosen consistently. And most importantly, you want to choose yourself. So if they return, do not ask, do they regret losing me? Ask, does their presence improve the life I have built? If the answer is yes, take your time. If the answer is no, keep moving. You are not cruel. You are conscious. You are not bitter. You are healed enough to protect yourself. You are not arrogant. You have learned your worth. And you are not closing your heart. You are simply no longer leaving it unlocked for everyone. There is a difference. Ladies and gentlemen, someone may regret losing you. They may realize your value. They may miss your presence. They may replay memories. They may wish they had behaved differently. They may even return. But none of that should be the reason you move forward. Move forward because you deserve peace. Move forward because you deserve respect. Move forward because you deserve a life where you do not have to beg someone to see your worth. Move forward because your future is waiting. And if someone wants to walk beside you again, they must prove that they can walk beside the person you have become. Not the person you used to be. Not the person who tolerated everything. Not the person who begged. Not the person who waited. The person who knows herself. The person who respects herself. The person who chooses herself. That person is no longer available for the same treatment, and that is the real lesson. You do not need to punish them. You do not need to chase them. You do not need to convince them. You do not need to make them regret anything. Just become so deeply committed to your own life that their regret becomes irrelevant. And then whether they return or never return, you will be okay. Because you finally understand something that heartbreak was trying to teach you from the beginning. You were never supposed to spend your life trying to convince someone to value you. The right people recognize your value. The right people respect your boundaries. The right people do not require you to destroy yourself to prove your love. And the wrong people? Sometimes they have to lose you before they understand. Let them learn. But do not wait for the lesson. Your life is too valuable. Your time is too precious. Your heart has too much potential. Your future is too important, so close the door if you need to. Walk away if you must. Cry if you need to. Grieve, heal, rest, but keep moving. Because there is a version of you on the other side of this pain who is stronger than the person who entered it. And one day you will look back and say, I thought losing them would destroy me. But losing them taught me how to find myself. I thought I needed their apology, but I learned how to forgive myself. I thought I needed them to return, but I learned how to move forward. I thought their regret would heal me, but I discovered that my own growth was enough. That is freedom. That is healing. That is self-respect. And that is the moment when their regret no longer matters. Because you are no longer waiting for them to realize what they lost. You already realize what you gained. You gained yourself. And that is something no one can take away from you again. So let them regret. Let them remember. Let them wonder. Let them learn. But don't take them back simply because they finally understand your value. Make them demonstrate theirs. And if they cannot, keep walking. There is nothing behind you that is more important than the life waiting in front of you. Your best days are not necessarily behind you. Your best love may not be behind you. Your greatest success may not be behind you. Your greatest peace may not be behind you. Your strongest version has not necessarily appeared yet. So keep going. Keep growing. Keep healing. Keep choosing yourself. Because sometimes the person you thought was your greatest loss becomes the experience that teaches you your greatest lesson. Never lose yourself trying to keep someone who is willing to lose you. And when you finally understand that, you stop chasing. You stop begging. You stop waiting. You stop proving. You simply live. And that is when your life becomes powerful again. Not because someone regrets losing you, but because you no longer regret letting them go. That is the freedom you were looking for. That is the peace you deserve. And that is where your next chapter begins.